maybe a week of this. He could tell we weren't taking it seriously. Prabhupada said, I am writing these books for you. You have to know these books. He said, if someone stops and asks you, can you read this, the Sanskrit? And you say, no, no, I'm not reading, I'm just selling. Prabhupada said, what is that? I'm writing these books for you. And it was just pleading with us, so then we took it very seriously after that to learn the Sanskrit.
Yes. So I took up this from his mouth, that he's very fond of books. And he told me personally that if you get some money, print books. Therefore I am stressing on this point. Where is book, where is book, where is book? So kindly help me. This is my request. Print as many books in as many languages and distribute throughout the whole world. Then Krishna consciousness movement will automatically increase.
The dance troupe portion of the Vaikuntha Players was in town, and they asked me to do musical accompaniment for a special showing, The Killing of Pralambasura, in the old temple room, only for Srila Prabhupada. There was narration from the Krishna book, and they acted out a dance drama pastime. So only Srila Prabhupada, his servant, and maybe one other devotee were in the temple room at the time. And I sat at Prabhupada's lotus feet with a mridanga, singing different bhajans to accompany the pure dance segment of the dance drama. And occasionally I would look up at Srila Prabhupada to see his reaction. And when Lord Balaram killed Pralambasura, striking him with his fist, at that moment I looked up at Srila Prabhupada, and his mouth dropped open, his eyes got very wide, and then he began smiling and laughing, and you could see he was totally immersed in the pastime, and he really expressed his appreciation of how hearing the pastimes was so important. And that's what made this so special, was that the story came to life by hearing the words of the pure devotee right from Krishna book, and then the dance accompanying it.
It happened on 3 different occasions. I went in and Prabhupada was reading Krishna book, and he said, if you just read this one book, you can be Krishna conscious. He said, you don't have to read hundreds of books, just this one book. And he had his glasses on, and I was sitting in front of him. Then he just looked at me and he said, you don't even have to read the whole book, just one chapter. If you just read one chapter of this book, you can be Krishna conscious. And I'm just nodding my head, yes, Prabhupada. But he just kept staring. And then he said, you don't even have to read the whole chapter, just one page. And he just ran his finger down the page. And then he's looking, and he said, you don't even have to read the whole page, just one line. And he ran his finger across the line of the Krishna book. And I said, yes, Prabhupada. And he's still looking. And he said, you don't even have to read a whole line, just one word. And he pointed to a word in the book. He said, just one word of this book, if you read, you can become Krishna conscious, because Krishna is in every word. And then he put his head back down into the book, and I offered obeisances and I left. But he said that about 3 different books to me over a year. If you just read this one book, once it was Nectar Devotion, once it was Bhagavad Gita, once it was Krishna book. But he said, any one of these, if you just read this one book, you can be Krishna conscious. You can understand. Krishna is in every word. And this is what Prabhupada gave us. Nobody else has given us this. This direct connection to Krishna through his pure devotee.
Different people are coming to visit Prabhupada. So everybody's bringing Prabhupada something. So the first person comes in, gives Prabhupada a nice gold Omega watch, real gold watch. Prabhupada says, thank you very much, puts it on, takes the watch he had on, and gives it to whoever was there. Then another person comes in, gives Prabhupada a gold Rolex watch. That must have been at least $3,500. He takes off the gold Omega, gives that away to somebody, puts the gold Rolex watch on. Thank you very much. Then another person comes in and gives Prabhupada a Seiko, the cheapest of all three of them, right? Maybe it was a $100 watch. Prabhupada says, oh, takes the gold Rolex, gives that away, puts the Seiko on. Thank you very much. You can see, Prabhupada was simply accepting on behalf of Krishna. Nothing like, oh, wow, save this one for me or put it in my drawer. Nothing like this, just whatever you're giving is, I'm taking on Krishna's behalf. You would see that in Prabhupada all the time, No mundane attachment.
I was making pillowcases and curtains and bed covers. There's also one pillowcase I made with tassels on the end, and Prabhupada's leaning against that and playing with the tassel. Prabhupada watched me cleaning, particularly his desk. He would sit behind the desk, and I would take all the things off the desk, wipe the whole desk, and then wipe each article and put it back exactly where it was before. And Prabhupada really liked that. He told me, it is very nice how you're cleaning and putting things exactly the way it was before.
The first time that Prabhupada came to the new Los Angeles temple, it was done so nicely with all the marble, all the decorations, flowers being showered down, and playing Jamuna's Govindam. And then Prabhupada went up to his apartment. Bhavananda had done the painting, blue walls, the white ceiling, and the orange curtains. That was the standard. It was so nice with the incense. And I said, Prabhupada, this is heaven. And Prabhupada looked at me and he grimaced. He said, heaven? This is Vaikuntha. There is a big difference between heaven and Vaikuntha.
And Bhaktivinoda Thakur stated that he was leaving this planet with his work unfinished.
Then let us finish. We are descendants of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he kept unfinished so that we shall get the chance to finish it. That is his mercy. He could have finished immediately. He's Vaishnava, he's all powerful. But he gave us the chance. It is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's mercy. The air carries different flavor of the physical elements.
This is probably the most intimate scene we've ever filmed of Srila Prabhupada. Vishaka was doing the recording of the sound, and I was shooting the 16mm camera. Really, the reason we got a chance to film this scene goes back to the Gurpurnim Festival of 1974, where we premiered the first ISKCON film documentary, The Hare Krishna People. Srila Prabhupada appreciated that film and encouraged us to make more films. I thought at that time that I would eventually want to make a documentary on Srila Prabhupada's life. So I asked him if that would be possible. And his reply was, what is the need? And I said, in the future, people will want to know who started the Hare Krishna movement. Srila Prabhupada thought for a moment and then gave his consent to make the film. We didn't have a script at that time. I just thought we should film Srila Prabhupada in as many different situations as possible. So in the summer of 1975, Srila Prabhupada came to LA, and we shot more film during that week than I think any other period of time. I was most nervous shooting this scene of Srila Prabhupada translating, really in fear of disturbing him. But we can see that he was totally absorbed in his translation. And I don't think anyone else could have done that, to have a large 16mm camera pointed at them, at the same time being fully absorbed in their work. And it really must have been a distraction for him, because we had set up lights inside, otherwise there wasn't enough light. And actually at the end of this scene he looks up and speaks to me. And at that point I panicked and immediately turned off the camera.
So it was just definitely his mercy that he allowed us to film so many different varieties of scenes during that time in Los Angeles.
I stayed in LA from 73 till 76. And whenever Srila Prabhupada was visiting, I would rise very early, sometimes at 1 o'clock, 1:30 was normal, and I would go behind the temple. And there was an alleyway behind the LA temple. There was a laundromat that the devotees used, and it was dark and creepy at night. But anyhow, I went there, and standing behind the temple, you could look up at Srila Prabhupada's quarters, his darshan room window, and he was always there, no matter how early I got up. He was always already sitting there, and sometimes I could hear him softly chanting japa. It's mostly summer there, and the windows were open, or quite often I would hear him translating. And I would chant my japa softly down there and think that I was protecting Srila Prabhupada because it was a dark alley and he was silhouetted in the window. You could see him, and I was always afraid someone would come. You know, it was the time of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and these people had been shot. So I used to get up early and chant there and protect Prabhupada. But it was nice because I felt like it was a little time with him. I could hear him translating or hear him chanting.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives in this connection a description of the difference of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and ordinary living being.
The first time we were in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada went down there from San Francisco. This is in Los Angeles, 1968. And at that time, we joined him. Prabhupada was living in this apartment that was so noisy. There was a guy who liked loud music at night, which was disturbing to Prabhupada. But one of the things that happened there that's very nice, Prabhupada had started teaching us up in San Francisco. This is just after he returned to America. We had expressed a desire to learn Bengali and Sanskrit. So every day we would come into his room at a certain time, and he would recite the alphabet, and we would recite it after him. And then he would talk about it. I really wanted to be able to read Chaitanya Charitamrita, but I couldn't because I didn't know the language. So Prabhupada taught me one verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, which, by the way, was not printed at this time. Remember, there's only his big Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was always open every morning when I cleaned his room. That's what he would read in the early morning times, was his Chaitanya Charitamrita. I would find it open. It was beautiful. It just glowed. And I would clean it very nicely, and I would wish that I could read it and everything. He knew that I had this affection for Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so he taught me a verse from it. And he would ask me to sing it every day. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Shahodito Gora Daye Pushpa Banto Chitra Shando Tamonito. And he explained that the meaning of this verse is that normally the sun and the moon don't rise together. But in this case, both the sun and the moon have arisen over the land of Gauda. And they're Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who are just like the sun and the moon, and they're dispelling all the darkness of the world. And every day he would say, Govindasi, have you remembered that verse? And I would sing it to him. I never forgot it. And he was so happy. He was so delighted. So then we went down to LA, and many times he would ask me, have you remembered that verse? And I would sing it to him. He loved it. While we were in LA that time, this is the first time, we would sit at the kitchen table and write the letters. We were learning the alphabets of Sanskrit, Devanagari. And one time Prabhupada came into the room and he looked over our shoulder at what we were doing for a few minutes. And then he said, Krishna does not need our service. He simply needs our love. He simply needs to see we're trying to serve him. Just like the teacher may see that the child is making scribbles, but he sees that the child is trying, so he feels happy. So it's like that. Krishna doesn't need anything from us, but he wants our love. He wants to see that we are trying to love him. It was very profound instruction. And that was a very sweet time. I was working on the cover of the Gita, the original Gita, the purple one, and he was supervising it. It was a universal form. It had a lot of arms, but Macmillan took them all off. But the drawing that Prabhupada had me do had lots of arms. So Prabhupada would come in, and over my shoulder he would guide me in doing that. When Prabhupada took a nap, I would sit quietly and read. The books that Gorsunder had gotten were the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They were done by an Indian. They were the only Chaitanya Charitamrita in English prior to Prabhupada's. 7 skinny little books that Gorsunder had bought at some Indian store in New York. It wasn't Gaudiya Math, it was a translation by some scholar, but they were nice. They were better than nothing. And so I used to sit on the floor and read them while Prabhupada was resting, because we didn't have any books. Just remember, the Gita hadn't been printed. There was only the 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I would sit and read them, and Prabhupada could see how much we liked them. And that was when he decided that he would translate Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Gorsunder was learning Bengali, so he would do the transliteration. He would give me a tape every day, and I would transcribe it. If you look in the front part of Chaitanya Charitamrita, some of my friends have requested me to do. It's because we were so eager to have Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Of course, it was difficult to get on Prabhupada's morning walk. The scene that stands out in my mind is 1 or 2 cars parked in that alleyway next to Prabhupada's quarters on Watseka Avenue. 2 cars ready to go, packed, just packed with the most competitive sannyasis and senior devotees who would do anything to get on that morning walk with Prabhupada. And if you weren't in that top echelon, it was pretty tough to get on those walks. But anyway, somehow or other, from the lower echelons, I did get onto a couple of them. One thing I remember is just how much Prabhupada walked and how fast Prabhupada walked. I was so grateful to be on the walk, and then I was so exhausted trying to keep up with Prabhupada and the devotees. It was really quite something.
Prabhupada had become very disturbed. He had learned that his manuscript that he had written through amazing sacrifice of sleep, he stayed up at night and dictated his books. They had been sent in to our New York BBT office, and they had not done the production. He had written so many books with commentaries, and they were just lying there. So Prabhupada had flown into Los Angeles, and it was a very tense beach walk. He was discussing how important it was to publish these books, and how upset he was that they were lying there, and he was demanding that they be published right away. He then asked, how long will it take? So Radha Ballava from New York was there, because he had been the production manager. So we pulled ourselves back, and we discussed, how long will it take you to get me the book so I can send them to the printer? And he told me that he thought we could do 1 book every 2 months. I mean, at this point, we were doing 1 book every 4 to 6 months. So we went back into the walk, we caught up again, and we told Prabhupada, we think we can do 1 book every 2 months. So Prabhupada turned around and said, I want all 17 books done in 2 months. I just blurted out to Prabhupada, that's impossible. At that point, Prabhupada stopped walking. And he had a cane, and he planted it in the sand. And he turned around and looked at me very gravely and said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And there was complete silence. We were all stunned. We were just completely stunned. Here's Prabhupada perfectly in touch with Krishna, telling us that this can be done. It seemed to defy the physical laws as we knew it. So after some very long moments of silence, Prabhupada started walking immediately, and the senior devotees, they just turned and started staring at me, like, so what are you going to do? So this was a matter of just absolute blind faith. Either you believed or you did not believe. It was that type of moment where you commit. Never mind what your intelligence is telling you is possible. So Radha Ballava and I kind of fell back again, and we just started talking again. We have to do this. This can be done. And all of a sudden, we started coming up with ideas that we hadn't thought of. And we just started getting ideas of different parallel production lines and turning the production lines into 24-hour production lines with 2 or 3 shifts, and recruiting devotees from all over to help us with this, and on and on and on. And this was all happening in the span of just a few minutes. We were just being flooded with these ideas. And we both realized that in order to do this, we all had to be together in one central place. And it seemed more logical to do it in Los Angeles. We have the housing for everybody, and we can expand easily. So then we caught up to the walk, and we said to Srila Prabhupada, if we're going to do this, we have to move the entire BBT division from New York to Los Angeles. The art department, the production, everything. And Srila Prabhupada approved that. He said, fine, do it immediately. And we started.
I was a very fast typist in the composing department, so they were trying to round up any of the past composers to get them all on board. And they flew me out from New Vrindavan to Los Angeles. I tell you, that was so nectarian that because of the support system that Ramaswar set up, a family was designated to cook or to maintain that devotee, do their laundry, feed them. Because we were staying up in the nighttime, kind of irregular schedules, just to keep it around the clock, all the composers, the composing machines filled up. I saw as the days went on in typing this nectar from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the pastimes, the loving relationships between Lord Chaitanya and the devotees, that it was so sweet. I was able to just go beyond whatever limits I had before. And I was up all night and day practically. Just stopped to chant and to eat and sleep very little. And in fact, on one morning walk, Radha Ballava had said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, there's one Mataji who is practically not eating or sleeping. She's just typing all day and night. And Prabhupada said, yes, she is running on spiritual energy. He was speaking about me, as he told me later.
So the 17 books got published. The last book came out probably on the last day of the 2-month cycle. And we called the secretary and we told him, it's done. We gave up everything, and somehow it happened. And this is a very happy time. Everybody's feeling that there's nothing we can't do now. We can spread this movement anywhere in the world. There was no limitation on anything. That's how we were all feeling. Not just the devotees who immediately were involved, but devotees all over the world were feeling that there are no material restraints or limitations. And so it was really a great moment for everybody to just expand their book distribution and their convincing people to join the temples. It was just one of those great times.
There was such a innocence, enthusiastic innocence that made everything very, very beautiful. And I just remember at all the programs, everyone would come with so much enthusiasm and excitement, all cleanly, freshly showered with beautiful fresh tilak. Prabhupada's presence was so powerful that He actually transformed us physically, not just in the heart. When I look at pictures in the BTG from that period, everybody looked very, very beautiful. So that was a very, very special time how he infused us. And actually, when I first came to the temple in Brooklyn, I was attracted by the love that the devotees oozed out. You know, they were so welcoming and everyone wanted to serve. It was like a privilege. Like even at the offerings, especially the 4 o'clock offering, there would be pies and cakes and cookies and ice creams. And if you stood there like 10 minutes before the offering or something, there would be like 15 women coming from different parts of the community with their dishes to be offered. It was like in the Stories of Krishna book. So Prabhupada's influence when he was here was like that. It just was very enlivening. And he was just directing us towards Krishna, really, not towards himself. When I think on all the other gurus that I met before Prabhupada, no one directed you toward Krishna, they directed you towards them. That was the uniqueness of Prabhupada, and even now, after all these years, the other gurus are more so-called famous, really, than Prabhupada because they directed people towards them, whereas Prabhupada directed us toward Krishna and was very humble.
Srila Prabhupada gave some wonderful classes. The one I remember the most was a class in the new temple room where Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, among thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, for self-realization. And out of many thousands of such men, only one may know me in truth. And so then Srila Prabhupada looked around at the temple, and the whole temple room was packed, and the whole balcony was packed. I was sitting up in the front of the balcony so I could see clearly. And Srila Prabhupada was looking at all of us, and he said, so does this mean that only a few of you are going to become Krishna conscious and be with Krishna? He said, no, every one of you can be with Krishna. Every one of you can know Krishna in truth. You have come to Krishna after past lives of making progress in